Simgot is back, and not with one, not with two, not even with three, but four different types of driver in one IM. And that's not four drivers per side, that's four different drivers per side. So with that kind of insanity, how does Simgot's first quadbrid compete with the rest of the competition? Does Simgot still have the magic that got them as good as they are today? And does more drivers really mean better sound? Well, let's find out today in my review of the Simgot Supermix 4. First and foremost, big thanks to Simgot for sending over the Supermix 4 in exchange for my honest thoughts. Rest assured, all my thoughts and opinions are of my own, and I was not paid or compensated to say anything about the product. So I'm pretty sure Simgot doesn't really even need an introduction anymore. Bangers after bangers since 2021 with the EA500 all the way to the EA1000. But one thing that these IMs all have in common is, well, they're all single dynamic driver IMs. You know, EA500 single DD, EW200 single DD, EA500LM single DD, EA1000 technically single DD, and the only hybrid set that they've released so far is the EM6L, and that was a very well received set. So now they're coming up with this new quadbrid IM with the four different kinds of drivers per side. So is it good? Does all these drivers really make up for the $149 price tag for this hybrid IM? Well, let's find out, starting with the unboxing experience. The unboxing experience of the Supermix 4 is very basic and what you'd expect from Simgot. The SM4 comes in a rather unappealing green box with the X-ray view of the internals of the SM4, and I will say that Simgot's continuous showcase of the internals is a great thing for the consumers to know what's going inside their favorite IMs. As for inclusions, the SM4 comes with the IMs themselves, a leather carrying pouch, some ear tips, and some paperwork. As you might expect, Simgot has not changed one bit when it comes to their unboxing and inclusions, bare bones inclusion that may or may not be enough for you. As for the build and fit, the SM4 features a quadbrid setup with one dynamic driver, one balanced armature, one microplaner, and one piezoelectric driver. This is a first not only for Simgot, but also for me. This is all housed in a resin shell with an interface of 0.78 2-pin connector. Despite the amounts of drivers inside, the SM4 is surprisingly compact. It's larger than your usual Simgot IEM, but not as chunky as other multi-driver hybrid IEMs. Unfortunately, the build itself feels rather cheap, as if you've held the EM6L, it feels very similar with the very lightweight shell. It does not exude confidence, but at least it's not QDC like the EM6L. Where the SM4 brings it up back a bit is in the fit. While it's not as good as other resin shell IEMs, it's definitely better fitting, sealing, and more stable than the other Simgot sets that came before. The wings add the much needed stability without being intrusive over long listening sessions, but my favorite thing about the Supermix 4's physical features is, well, the cable. This reminds me of the Lecture DZ4 and Galileo cable, with its two-core construction that is aptly thick and very comfortable, let alone very aesthetically pleasing. I honestly would buy this kind of cable for my other IEM, so that's definitely a feat as a stock cable. I just wish it had interchangeable terminations, but it's acceptable for $149. So starting with the sound signature of the Simgot SM4, or Supermix 4, the Supermix 4 has a Harman bass boosted sound signature. Although I would say that it's more tilted to the bass more than the upper mids in my listening experience, but other people's graphs say differently, and compared to the other Harman IEMs that I've tried so far, this doesn't seem as egregious, not even compared to their other sets like the EW200, A500LM, or even the EA1000, which are pretty known to be quote-unquote shouty, but I never found these to be shouty at all. So the bass, very deep reaching, very rumbly, very it's so thick. I'm gonna save my comments for the bass later. It's just I'm really impressed by it with one condition. The mids, surprisingly neutral. I didn't find it to be too thin like a lot of other Harman sets, and the upper mids, not shouty or harsh at all. And that treble, the hallmark of a Simgot IEM. Amazing refinement, very smooth but very well extended, and really good details. And arguably one of the highlights about this is, like I said earlier, it's Harman, but it doesn't honestly sound like Harman IM. It sounds very generous in terms of the lower mids and the mid bass, although I'll talk more about that later. And the upper mids don't sound that harsh, so it's a pretty cohesive experience. And as a quad driver IM, quadbrid IM, this is very impressive that they were able to find this really nice harmony with all the different kind of drivers, with the exception of the bass. And that's the first thing I'm going to be talking about. So starting with the bass, it is the first thing that I noticed with the set because it went so deep. It was so deep that I could hear my head rumble. It's not overly bass headset. I just want to tell you that right now. It's not a bass headset. But the way that they did the extension of the bass, the low shelf of the bass of the Supermix 4 is unlike any Simgot IM that I've ever heard. It's really rumbly, it's very impactful, and when you listen to tracks with a lot of sub-bass emphasis, a lot of really low, deep sub-bass sounds and rumbles, this is able to present it in such a satisfying way, and it doesn't overblow it. It doesn't show it. It doesn't rumble as hard on tracks that don't need the rumble. But when you really need that rumble, this thing delivers. However, it suffers from one thing, and a pretty major thing for me personally. Probably not for you, but this is a major thing for me. It lacks tactility and punch. Quite a lot. This is the thing that I really fawn over Simgot sets, particularly A500 and the A1000, is the mid bass sounds so punchy and tactile, and the quality is just so good. Unfortunately, with the Supermix 4, quantity is really mostly there, as well as the cleanliness of the bass itself, where it doesn't bloat or bleed into the mid range. But it lacks tactility and engagement in that mid-bass region. The punchiness, the tactility when you're listening to bass lines, it just doesn't sound as distinct. And this also has the added effect of, in busier tracks, this bass kind of starts congesting the low end a little bit, as it's trying to keep up with the overall low end, but it's not able to do that. And that's a little problematic for some people. At least for me, when I listen to a lot of bassy tracks, I still want to hear those notes. I still want to hear those tactile strumming, and especially in the male vocals, which we'll talk about later. I want to be able to hear that, and in the Supermix 4, it's a little bit lacking for me. But don't get me wrong, the bass of this, very clean, very smooth, very deep, and it's just so satisfying to listen to electronics, or just like electronic music and stuff that have really deep sub bass. Okay, enough for the bass. All right, let's move on to the mid range, because the mid range is also something that is worth talking about for this set. Honestly, everything is worth talking about this set. Anyways, the mid range of this is surprisingly neutral. I did not expect the mid-range to sound as flat but as well defined as it is, because first thing I listened to, it's Harman set. I want to make sure that I can listen to some Leve with this, and I was expecting it to be clean, open, very on the thinner side, which I prefer for Leve. But no, this was in that perfect balance, in that perfect limbo of making Leve's voice sound naturally thick, but at the same time giving it that very open, crisp, and clean and clear note definition that I absolutely look for in an IAM whenever I listen to Leve. And this takes that balance almost perfectly. And that goes for me. That goes for a lot of other songs too that have a lot of low end or lower mid-ranged emphasis. It's able to represent it in a surprisingly nice way. I will say though, specifically on male vocals, I do wish that it was just a little bit, just very slightly thicker, but that's honestly for me, that's just like my taste, and like I could not really fault it for that as much, because it's decently defined. I would say it's well defined. The note weight, it's okay, it's decent, and most people will probably find that it's more than enough. What I love about the upper mids of this specifically is that it's not shouty. Like I said earlier in the sound signature section, I don't find the upper mids to be shouty for the Supermix 4. It is well balanced into the lower mids. There is a slight emphasis on the upper mids, but it is generally well balanced. A lot of nuances in the upper mid-range, good note definition, although lacking in nuances and tactility, and maybe a little bit of note weight in the lower mids, but overall, tuning-wise, it's very balanced. I don't find that the male vocals are lagging behind over the upper mid-range vocals like the female vocals and air instruments, but it's just well balanced. Good job, very nice. And as for the treble, like I said, Simgot magic here. Very well refined, very smooth, very crisp, very detailed, no harshness, no sibilance. A little bit on the, I wouldn't say it's like the Simgots from the yesteryears or yester months, I would say, where the focus is on the brightness. This one's more generous. Honestly, it doesn't really push out treble as much as something like, I don't know, the EM6L, for example. It doesn't really push it out as much as that set, but it does have a lot of details, a lot of nuances in the upper treble, or in the treble region in general. And the treble extension, just great. It's really good. Like another hallmark of a Simgot set. Very well extended treble, very, very airy, very nice, very sparkly. And I love this kind of treble, despite it not being as bright as, the older Simgot sets, which is what kind of I fell in love with. I'm slowly starting to fall in love with this slightly tamer Simgot kind of sound, and I can appreciate that, especially for a lot of people who were treble sensitives and thought that the Simgot sets from the yester months, again, was a little on the brighter side. This one's tamer, this one's calmer, but still as refined, still as detailed. And as for the technicalities, another thing why you would want to buy a Simgot set, good technicalities, the Supermix 4 does that as well, as you might expect. Very clean separation, although in the lower frequencies in the bass region, when it gets really busy there, it starts to get a little bit confused. But in the mid-range to treble, fantastic, very clean, well layered, solid overall. Imaging and head stage as well as stage depth is perfect. Head stage, thanks to that well extended treble. Stage depth, thanks to that sub bass extension, just perfect, very immersive listening experience. It's so good. Dynamics could be a little bit better. Transients, good, very nice. Not the most sharp as you might expect from their other sets, but it's perfectly acceptable, especially for this kind of detail retrieval. And very resolving set, very resolving. I didn't find myself feeling like it was like lo-fi or whatever in the set, and I loved it for that. I absolutely loved it. Compared to the CCA Hydro, the Hydro is the more engaging and energetic set, while the Supermix 4 is the more neutral and refined set. The Hydro has a brighter top and thicker low end with a more recessed mid-range, while the Supermix 4 has a tamer top end and less bass overall. The Supermix 4 is the more technical set overall, but the Hydro isn't lagging too far behind. If you want a more V-shaped and fun set, go for the Hydro, but if you want something more neutral and cleaner, go for the Supermix 4. Compared to the Celeste Phoenix Skull, it has a completely contrasting sound to the Supermix 4, as the former is more V-shaped, less refined, and more hybrid sounding overall. The Supermix 4 has a more coherent and refined overall sound, but doesn't sound as colored or quote-unquote fun as the Celeste's very musical presentation. They have a very similar technical ability, but the Supermix 4 does technicalities in a cleaner way. Compared to the Simgot EM6L, the EM6L is the more musical, smoother, and thicker sounding set, while the Supermix 4 is the leaner, more bass boosted, and technical and detailed set overall. The QDC alone is enough to make me to prefer the Supermix 4 over the EM6L, but the EM6L has that insanely smooth treble that's also bright, that's giving it the Simgot magic over the Simgot Supermix 4. And lastly, compared to the Simgot A1000, this is the pioneer of the Simgot magic. Insanely technical, dynamic, and detailed set that is unlike anything that came out before and up until now like it. Compared to the Supermix 4, however, the Supermix 4 is the more versatile and safer set between the two, as the Supermix takes that refined sound but tames the treble and adds the much needed low end that people complain about the EA1000. This also means that there is less magic in the sound, but I would argue that some people would say that's better. And to finally conclude, I think that the Simgot SM4 or Supermix 4 is the most different Simgot in their entire lineup by far, but it stays consistent with Simgot's identity of having a very refined, very smooth, very clean, but very detailed type of sound. And it is their most fun sounding IM. It is technically the most versatile sounding IM as well, because I find that the neutral mid-range fits more genres than their older sets. But at the same time, I also think that this is just a very refined set from Simgot. It's just a solid outing for their first quadbrid and their second technically hybrid set. And I just think it's good. I mean, at first I didn't like it as much. Like, I'll be honest, when I first listened to this, I kind of thought it was a little unremarkable. Like, it didn't really have the Simgot magic, but the more you listen to this thing and the more you stress test it, the more you listen to more genres, the more you realize that no, Simgot magic is still in this IM. It's still the refined, the very clean, the very sharp, but still very detailed sounding IM coming from Simgot. And I can really appreciate that. Although I will say, Simgot, I hope you upgrade your accessories soon. I love the cable, but please, this is the same case that came with the A500LM and the EM6L, but worse. The ear tips, please, it doesn't fit this one as much. I had to go with a different set of ear tips. And I guess better bass tactility. I mean, sound-wise, not really much to complain. It's just how it is. But yeah, there's really not a lot to complain about the set, honestly. $149 quadbrid. Does that mean that more drivers mean better sound? Well, if you can tune it like Simgot, you will. And that's my review for the Simgot Supermix 4. I started to love this set. At first I didn't as much. I loved it now, and I'm loving it even more the more I listen to it. So, thank you so much for watching my review on the Simgot Supermix 4. If you like this content, please consider giving me a like. If you want to see more of my content, subscribe. If you would like to check my socials, they're down below. Check it out. Check out the Discord. Talk to me. Check out Audio Notions. Join Forsaken Audiophiles. And with that, obodio out.